Today on The Conservative Rebel, as young voters flock to the conservative movement and the Democrat Party becomes increasingly old and irrelevant, leftists are frantically trying to come up with a strategy to win back voters, and failing miserably at it. It's hilarious to watch in a very depressing way. Instead of moderating their insane positions, they've decided to double down on them. They've come up with a brilliant new dark woke strategy, which is to advocate the same insanity, but just be even more obnoxious and insufferable than they already were while doing it. You won't want to miss today's episode of The Conservative Rebel. For decades, the left has been tightening its stranglehold on most of America's institutions. From preschool to the most advanced Ivy League colleges, education is controlled by the left. From Amazon to Google to Microsoft, the biggest, most powerful corporations on Earth are also controlled by the left, and for decades the federal bureaucracy has been controlled by the left, and mostly insulated from any accountability by elected officials. But most importantly, for years, the culture has been controlled by the left. But now, in 2025, the ideological balance, particularly in the culture, is beginning to shift, and it's shifting dramatically. Just a few years ago, for example, gender ideology pervaded across the culture, and now that's completely changed, and the gender ideologues are now locked in a desperate battle for survival, as more and more states ban child mutilation and Trump bans men from women's sports. And just a few years ago, conservatives were intimidated into silence and submission by the BLM mob. Now they're fighting to end anti-white racism and discrimination in the form of DEI. And just a few years ago, corporations proudly bragged about how woke they were, as if that was a good thing, and now woke corporations are rightly hated and boycotted and shamed. But the most significant cultural shift that's happened in recent years is this. Young voters are increasingly becoming conservative. In fact, young voters are more conservative than they've ever been before. Recent polls have confirmed that this is true. Newsweek recently ran the following headline, quote, "Young people are now overwhelmingly Republican." Young Americans are supporting the Republican Party in greater numbers, a new poll has found, highlighting a large divide among people aged under 30. According to a new Yale Youth poll, a survey affiliated with the Yale Institution for Social and Political Studies, voters aged 18 to 21 lean Republican by 11.7 points when asked who they would support in the 2026 congressional elections, while voters aged 22 to 29 favored Democrats by just 6.4 points. And I say just 6.4 points because if you look at the historic margins that the 22 to 29 demographic and young people favor Democrats by, that's not a lot at all. The article continues, quote, "Young people traditionally vote for Democrats in elections, but a conservative shift among Gen Z voters helped President Donald Trump secure the keys to the White House in November 2024. David B. Cohen, a political science professor at the University of Akron in Ohio, told Newsweek, "Going forward, Democrats will have to figure out how to bring young voters back to the fold, particularly young men, if they want to be competitive nationally." And this is by no means an outlier poll. If it was, the Democrats would not be nearly as alarmed as they are about this phenomenon. Polls have consistently shown that young people, particularly young men, are abandoning the Democrat Party and the left at large in droves and becoming more conservative than ever before. Why is this happening? The reason, I think, is simple. Young people, especially young men, have a natural instinct to be rebels. They have a natural instinct to resist established authority. This has been true since approximately forever. And historically, these young people have found an outlet for that energy in leftist activism. Historically, they've rebelled against all that is good and true and beautiful. Historically, they have rebelled against Christianity, against morality, against the nuclear family, against capitalism, against everything that has made our country and Western civilization great. Young people were the hippies, they were the feminists, they were the BLM activists in 2020. But all of that's changing, because since the left has had a virtual monopoly over education and the culture and the government for generations, and since it has used that power, of course, to do everything it can to destroy our country and to destroy civilization, now as a young person, if you support that, you are not a rebel anymore. If you are a leftist, you're not a rebel. You're an obedient, mindless cog in the wheel in the machinery of the regime. You're a slave who's going along with the program. You're obeying the every whim of your masters, who are celebrities, politicians, college professors, and other manipulative tyrants who want to use you as a pawn to advance their agenda. All those morons who burn Tesla dealerships and demand Trump return MS-13 terrorists to the United States, they're not rebels. They're just doing the bidding of the elites. When young people look at that, a lot of them don't want any part of it anymore. They don't see these people as rebels. They don't see them as anything to emulate. They don't see what they're doing as anything to aspire to. They see them as thoughtless, soulless, self-loathing automatons of misery and despair. And rightly so. As a leftist, you cannot rebel against a culture that you control. You cannot rebel against the elites when you're one of their minions. If you truly want to fight for freedom, if you truly want to be an independent thinker, if you want reform, if you want to be a rebel, guess what? You're a right-winger now. When your society is controlled by feminists and atheists and gender ideologues and communists, you'll gravitate as a rebelliously inclined person toward things like the nuclear family, things like Christianity and tradition and sanity and common sense and everything those people hate. This is why young people, and young men especially, are becoming more and more conservative, so to say. But that term doesn't quite capture it, because they're not changing their beliefs because they want to conserve society as it is. Most of the things that those of us who would call ourselves conservatives stand for are already dead. The left has killed them. The left has already killed so much of what was great about our country. So we're not fighting to conserve this state that our country is in. That would be insane. These young people who are becoming conservatives are fighting for the restoration of America. The restoration of sanity and truth and justice to the world. The restoration of the things that the left killed. This is a crucial point for everyone on the right to understand. And a lot of them don't, unfortunately. We're not fighting to preserve our country the way it is. That would be ridiculous, given how much unchecked power the left currently has over our country, and the state of moral depravity that pervades a lot of our society, because ironically, the so-called liberals of the world are now the ones fighting for the status quo, and the so-called conservatives are the revolutionaries fighting for meaningful reform. The Democrat Party, meanwhile, is increasingly old, feeble, pathetic, lame, and gay, dominated by zeros who embody those traits, like Tim Walz, Bernie Sanders, and Kamala Harris, who, by the way, according to a recent poll, is the front-runner in the 2028 Democrat primary. Unbelievably, more Democrats want cackling Kamala to run against J.D. Vance than any other candidate they can think of. But back to the point. This generational shift is a serious problem that the left must contend with. They have to. They will die if they don't. And as they twist in the icy emptiness of irrelevance, they're desperately trying to come up with a way, some way, any way, that they can try to win back the millions of voters they've driven away with their insanity. And if they were sensible people, they would try maybe moderating their positions. They would stop advocating things like child mutilation and abortion till the moment of birth, and start veering toward the center to try to win back some moderates and independents. Of course, all of it would be fake, but they could at least pretend to not be totally deranged, and they'd probably bring back a lot of people to the Democrat Party. But these are not, of course, sensible people, and their newest strategy reflects that. Introducing dark woke. Now, what exactly does dark woke mean, you might ask? I don't feel personally that I would do justice to this brilliant and sophisticated new political strategy if I tried to explain it myself. So I'll let a leftist writing a piece on this exciting new trend in the New York Times explain it for us. Here's the headline. What is dark woke? Quote, "There was a time last summer when the Democrat Party is cool. That moment has long passed." All right, we're going to have to stop right there because one sentence in and we already have serious problems. This guy is already getting things wrong. No, there was not a time last summer when the Democrat Party was cool. You were never cool last summer. I don't know if you guys remember this, but you started off last summer with a frail, senile, brain-dead vegetable who couldn't string a sentence together running for president on your party's ticket. Then Trump murdered that frail, senile, brain-dead vegetable on live TV when he debated him. It looked so bad for you that you staged a coup and kicked him off the Democrat ticket. Then who did you brainiacs choose to replace him? Another brain-dead vegetable who, again, couldn't string a sentence together. Just this time, her name happened to be Kamala Harris instead of Joe Biden. You were never cool. Your entire support base consisted of college students with IQs even lower than Kamala Harris's and liberal grandmas who were offended at Trump's mean tweets. You then proceeded to lose young voters by humiliating historic margins, and you got crushed in the 2024 election. There are many words you can use to describe that, but cool is certainly not one of them. The article goes on, unfortunately, quote, "That moment has long passed. With Donald J. Trump back in the White House, the culture of dude-heavy pop podcast programming, provocative insults, and so-called masculine energy that helped him get there seems like a dominant one." Yes, dude-heavy pop podcast programming is a real phrase that the New York Times is actually putting in their news articles. How did that one slip through the system? That's what I want to know. Not only did whoever wrote this piece see nothing wrong with it, probably thought it was smart, probably was very proud of it, probably spent a good deal of time trying to come up with how to do that and make it sound nice and poppy and all that. Not only did he not see anything wrong with that, none of the editors did either. No actual human being has ever once in his entire life used the phrase dude heavy pop podcast programming. Joe Rogan doesn't have host of Dude Heavy Pop podcast in his X bio, and neither does anyone else. It's absurd. But we shouldn't spend too much time on that, so let's go on. The article continues, quote, "And to some, the response from the left during the previous Trump era, defined by an earnest resistance to the president's agenda, appears outdated and cringe," kind of like this article. "As liberals try to get their groove back, some party insiders say Democratic politicians have been encouraged to embrace a new form of combative rhetoric aimed at winning back voters who have responded to President Trump's no-holds-barred version of politics. It's an attempt to step outside the bounds of the political correctness that Republicans have accused Democrats of establishing. And it requires being crass but discerning, rude but only to a point. Online it has a name: dark woke. Republicans have essentially put Democrats in a respectability prison," said Bavik Lafayette, a communications consultant and former digital director for the Wisconsin Democratic Party. "There is an extreme imbalance in strategy that allows Republicans to say stuff that really grabs voters' attention, while we're being stuck saying boring pablum. I see this as a strategic shift within Democratic messaging. I'm a big fan of dark woke." Dark woke, for now, is a meme that lives mostly online, but its roots have been sown throughout the party for years. In the waning days of the Biden administration, memes about Dark Brandon often referred to the version of the former president that conservatives most feared. And I too can attest to this. When I saw the Dark Brandon stickers that people put on their cars with Joe Biden with his laser vision, I saw that and I was filled with fear. I was filled with terror. I thought we would lose the election before Kamala Harris was nominated, and I saw the Dark Brandon stickers. I thought, they're going to win the election with that sticker. There's no way we're going to win, but then they did Kamala, so I didn't have to worry about the Dark Brandon stickers anymore. The article goes on, quote, "Outside the party, the dirtbag left, the term for a cohort of leftist provocateurs who eschew civility politics, inspired headlines for their unrestrained derision of conservatives and liberals alike. Democrats have embraced some aspects of the right's toolkit, as Trump advisors like Elon Musk have used slurs and profanity online. Communications consultants for Democratic politicians have encouraged or allowed more swearing. Profanity is often seen as a shortcut to authenticity, though it can also be overused and backfire." And then the article pretty much ends there. That's basically the gist of it. So essentially, the entire dark woke strategy Democrats have been hyping up as this great thing. This is how they're going to win. This is how they are going to beat the Republicans in the midterms. The whole strategy that they've been hyping up is pretty simple. They're just going to advocate the same insane, unpopular BS they've supported for the past who knows how many years. They're just going to be even more obnoxious and insufferable than they already were while they're doing it. It's just being more obnoxious and insufferable. That's the key. That's how they're going to do this. Because that's what really drove normies and independents away from the Democrats. Normie and independent voters, they weren't abandoning the Democrat Party because it's on the wrong side of everything. These dark woke morons are insisting. That couldn't possibly be the case. It couldn't possibly be the case. that they are losing because they do dumb things like send one of their senators down to El Salvador for a bizarre photo op where he lovingly sips margaritas with a wife-beating drug gangster and proudly blasts the humiliating photos of his date with this guy all over the internet. No, the real reason they're leaving is obviously because the Democrats are just such kind and wonderful and caring people. They're leaving because the Democrats, in their infinite wonderfulness and lovingness and graciousness and generosity, have forgotten that politics requires a little bit of anger and a little bit of firmness, and they've just been too nice to conservatives. And also they don't use enough profanity. That's the other key to this thing. That's the other piece of the puzzle. So they just need to start using some slurs and some more F-bombs, just start peppering their insane word salads with some more of those, and everything will be A-okay. And if that's not insane enough, the author of this article actually seems to think that conservatives have been the mean ones. The side that burns down cities and destroys Tesla dealerships and shoots Trump says that conservatives are meaner than they are. They're winning because the conservatives are mean, and because the leftists won't fight back. They won't fight back the conservatives' meanness with their own meanness. That's why they're losing. No, the exact opposite is true. Conservatives are the ones who have been far, far too nice for far, far too long. During the deepest depths of the transgender mass psychosis, like in 2020, 2021, 2022, you think conservatives were too mean then? No, they went along with the whole thing. You think conservatives are too mean now? Look at all these people marching on the college campuses. Look at the 50-51 movements. Look at the Tesla dealerships being burned to the ground. Which side is doing that? It's the left. It's the left that is doing that. Conservatives are sitting at their houses, living their lives. The problem is that conservatives, they oftentimes do not fully realize the gravity of the situation, because a lot of them are still locked in this mentality that politics is about roads and bridges and dumb, boring things like this. Politics is boring, right? We don't want to get into politics. It's controversial meaninglessly because it's all boring. They don't see it as this right versus wrong, good versus evil things, where one side is mass murdering unborn babies and the other side wants to protect them. One side is mutilating children, the other side wants to protect them. They don't see it that way, which is why they've been too nice for far too long. So what really needs to happen is someone needs to write an article like this and put it up on Fox News or whatever. We need a dark conservatism, okay? Like, not this dumb thing that they're writing about, not like this, but we need a more energetic conservatism. We need conservatives to stop being nice to baby murderers and child mutilators. We need conservatives who are willing to speak the truths everyone else is afraid to say. We need conservatives who do not care what anti-civilizational barbarians think about them, and who are willing to stand up and fight for truth and justice and sanity. That's what we actually need. And that's the way that we will help to keep this going, where the left is bleeding young voters, because they want authenticity. They don't like people who just dance around issues, who refuse to confront the actual heart of the matter, who are just wishy-washy and try to be nice to everyone. What we need is people who are willing to say uncomfortable truths like abortion is murder. We need to stop it. There are only two genders. You've got most conservatives are willing to say that now, but we need to go even further. Gender transitions need to be banned. We need a more confrontational conservatism, and that's how you win more voters. There are a lot of these people who say that the right needs to moderate to win more people. How's that gone the past several decades, the past 100 years, the past however long it's been? How's that gone? Because that's what we try every election. Okay, that's what we've always tried. It never works. The authenticity will win them over. For the Democrats, they need to moderate if they want to survive because they're so insanely far left, but they're not going to. And that's not bad news necessarily, that's good news. Because if they don't moderate, they will keep losing. If the Democrats keep crying about MS-13 terrorists being deported, if they keep wailing about Elon Musk saving taxpayers' money, things are not going to go well for them in the next election. The big question of politics after the 2024 election has been, will the Democrats learn? And this dumb, dark woke strategy is yet another sign that no, they will never learn. It's yet another sign that these people have no political sense at all and are so insanely tone deaf, so insanely, stubbornly devoted to their radical ideology. They live up to their stubborn donkey mascot, I'll tell you that they will never learn. If they continue on like this, they have no hope of winning back young men. And all we have to do to claim victory over these people, to continue to beat them, to continue to win back the culture and take back the country, is to stop being sissies and to be bold about what we stand for, to not be afraid to speak hard truths, and to not be afraid of confrontation. If we can just do that, if we can just stand up for what we believe in, then we have a great chance of continued victory in the midterms and in the next election. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Conservative Rebel. Please follow the show, leave a review, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll see you on the next episode.